Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're back with another Warhammer The Old World video. Yes, I'm already starting to theorize about this, as it seems that Games Workshop have been hinting at stuff for the future. A few days ago, Games Workshop released some information in Warhammer community regarding stuff like rules, old miniatures and so on, but they also had some really curious information here regarding possible new factions. Now, before anything, full disclaimer, technically these factions aren't new, but they haven't been relevant in Warhammer Fantasy lore for so long that they might as well count as new. Like close to 30 years type of thing for some of them. Let's start off with the basic, and it's a most recent race and faction. This is of course the Chaos Dwarfs. We already know that they're pretty much coming, despite the fact that they haven't confirmed anything, but another hint lies in a recent image. As you can see on the far right of this picture, it's a Chaos Dwarf icon, so yeah, plus obviously Zorn, Uzkul and all that are Chaos Dwarf territories, so yeah, we're getting Chaos Dwarves. In fact, since they've been hinted so heavily in Age of Sigmar, it's likely that they will be the same models that we can just use as backward compatible stuff, which I'm all for. Though there is one specific quote I want to highlight here, as this is the main brunt of everything else. You can see here that they say, when looking to the eastern steppes, clearly at this time, Kislev was a vast empire indeed, its territories encompassing the lands said by some to be haunted by hobgoblins, centaurs and half-orcs. Though who can say which of these, if any, are true? Well, first off, we know about hobgoblins very well. The fact is that they have been in Warhammer lore for a long time, and were usable by the Chaos Dwarf roster as they were enslaved. That and the fact is that this image right on here has iconography linking to the hobgoblins. So it could be possible that we'll see a sub-faction for the Hobgoblin Carnage so we can play as hobgoblins, which is super cool because I know loads of people have wanted this for a lot of different things. In fact, we've just received new hobgoblin miniatures for Age of Sigmar known as Hobgrots. They look kinda cool, very different to how they used to, but then again we're basically just seeing some very run-of-the-mill Hobgrots. I'm assuming there'll be more in the future. I mean, these two were pretty much always expected because, well, yeah, you know, they're quite important when it comes to the old world of Warhammer Fantasy. But then we look towards the more curious ones, Centaurs and Half-Orcs. These are actually really ancient races from way back in the day. In fact, Centaurs you might get confused with Centaurs, but they are actually not the same thing. So there's two bits of lore regarding the Centaurs. The first one here is from Warhammer Fantasy 2nd edition. Centaurs are enigmatic creatures, the wild horsemen of the Steplands. They are a free and uninhabited race, intelligent and reasonable, but not very interested in sedentary life. They live by herding and hunting. They are talented orators and have a great love of language and music. Their own tongue is melodic and complex. We also know from this entry that we can find centaurs in different parts of the Warhammer Fantasy world. Instead of just seeing them in the Steplands, we can also see them in the New World too, round about the areas that were pretty much inhabited by Dark Elves at a later time. Another entry can be found in the 3rd edition rulebook, which changes up their lore a little bit. Centaurs live upon the northern steppes east of the Old World and north of the Mountains of Morn. They are a free and uninhabited race, intelligent, reasonable and kindly. They are nomadic and have no permanent settlements, preferring to move through the steppes with the changing seasons. Centaurs live by hunting and herding, having little contact with other intelligent races, and trading only occasionally with the humans of Farside, east of the World's Edge Mountains. In ancient times, they were said to be friendly with the elves and occasionally travel through the Old World. Nowadays, however, the only centaurs in the Old World are captive of freak shows and circuses. Centaurs have an old age apathy towards the goblinoid races and most particularly hobgoblins. Okay, so what we know from this race is that they lived far up north in the steppes, very similar to that of the lands of the Kurgans and so on. In fact, they probably had some sort of diplomatic relations with them at some point, as not all Kurgans are chaos touched. Curiously, they were considered a good alignment race. I would have probably put them as neutral or something, But yeah, makes sense, they trade with elves and so on. It's rather curious as of course we've not seen any of this in later editions. It's likely that they added that in, and as time progressed they decided, well, probably time to write them out. Unless there's some sort of lore explanation which I can't seem to find online, that they might have been exterminated, as they might have lived way back in the past and then just, you know, it happens. It does happen to a lot of races. It's curious that Games Workshop have started referencing this because, yes, they are not Centaurs. They are far from it. Maybe Games Workshop are looking back at old notes and going, oh, right, we actually had plans for this. As it was known that they did have plans to flesh out the East and the steppes and all that, but eventually they just didn't have the time and never got to it. So it does make quite of an interesting thing, as a Centaur faction might be cool, maybe as a sub-faction or something. The thing is, this does make a lot of sense to me, as they will need to flesh out the lore and add in some factions that are not available in Age of Sigmar. That way you have some variety, you know? Or else everything can just be backward transferable and it's kind of boring, isn't it? It's curious, as we also know that Chaos Centaurs do exist, which this is their lore reading right now. Chaos Centaurs are warped by the dread influence of chaos. Like other creatures of chaos, Chaos Centaurs look to the day when the foul forms and twisted mass of chaos dominates the world. Chaos Centaurs may be found galloping with chaos armies. Okay, so yeah, corrupted versions of Centaurs, and this of course does make a lot of sense, because if they're northern and they're part of the steppes and so on, those are areas which got tainted. Keep in mind that all the northern territories are very close to the Chaos Wastes, which are in turn very close to that of the bridges to the realms of chaos themselves. So nothing is really that resistant. Even ogres, who are known to be highly resistant to chaos magic, some of them have fallen and have mutated and so on. So it does make sense for the centaurs to be able to do so. Perhaps that's why we don't see that many of them. In the future, they could just fully fall to chaos and wipe each other out. We can see in the artwork that this is clearly not a Centaur. Now, I'm not sure if Centaurs existed back in the day of 3rd edition, but keep in mind that 3rd edition and 2nd and so on, they referenced a lot of stuff which was never really fleshed out. Like, there's actually some cafe stuff in here too. We'll have to wait and see. Maybe we'll get like a Kurgan/Centaur race, where you could have to choose if you want to play them as Chaos or if you want to play them as good, as Untainted and so on, which could be rather cool. And now we move on to the last one, Half-Orcs. Now, Half-Orcs are very curious in the greenskin racial spectrum type of thing, as far as we are aware, the greenskins in Warhammer Fantasy have always worked in a very similar sense to the greenskins in Warhammer 40k. They are fungal life forms and thus reproduce by means of spores. And, well, a half-orc is kind of weird, isn't it? Because, well, it wouldn't be able to do that, would it? It's a hybrid creature. We actually have some lore to discuss this. In Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, which we know is canon, they were known as orc half-castes, or half-orcs. They are the spawn of mixed races, chiefly humans and goblinoids. So they're not really orcs, but goblins. All such creatures are commonly called half-orcs, although in fact they may have hobgoblin or goblin blood. Outcasts from both human and goblinoid society, they generally group together as brigands and mercenaries, and may appear in goblinoid armies on rare occasions. They have been used as both slaves and mercenaries by human society, but are now generally regarded as too dangerous to be kept near human communities. Several states have embarked on campaigns of extermination, which may have driven them closer to the orcs and other goblinoids. They speak the common goblin tongue, and some individuals speak a debased form of local human languages. That's no longer too relevant, as I believe that Warhammer Fantasy had some universal language in the form of Reichsspiel, which really doesn't fit with the canon, but let's not jump into that too much. And everyone just kind of speaks everything themselves, though some other races do have their own specific languages, like dwarves have Khazalid, the Skaven have Queekish, and so on. But this was obviously from Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. Now, they were also mentioned when it comes to Warhammer Fantasy 3rd Edition. A big thank you to Fanquil87 on Twitter for pointing this out to me. The entry here doesn't really say a lot. Half-orcs are of mixed human and goblinoid blood. Although known generally as half-orcs, they may sometimes have goblin or hobgoblin ancestors rather than orcs. These outcasts from human society usually end up as slaves, outlaws, or mercenaries. In fact, there's a decent amount of stuff here when it comes to a full faction too, so it's actually pretty interesting that they were so early in the lore but never received too much love. I guess there wasn't really a need, but it's curious that Games Workshop want to possibly revisit them. Now, I'll be perfectly honest with you, I don't think that half-orcs will be their own faction in the old world. Instead, I think that they might be slave units for that of the Hobgoblin Khanate, and maybe even show up in a possible Dogs of War army book too, as they would fit in rather nicely. They're known to be mercenaries and so on, so why can't they be mercenaries? I mean, it just sounds kind of cool, doesn't it? Rather than having old school types of orcs, which you could have in the Dogs of War army list back in 6th edition, but it doesn't really make sense because orcs generally don't care about money, like it's the least of their concerns. Again, it's very, very curious that Games Workshop would even mention this as, yeah, very ancient lore, but they're going back and they're rewriting stuff, so if they're mentioning it, they're at least considering it. What do you guys think about all this? I know it's a bit of a stretch, but then again, they wouldn't mention it if they had no intentions whatsoever. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below and let's start a bit of a discussion. But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description section below are various links to different social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram and Discord. Also in the description section is an affiliate link with Element Games where you could buy loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Making a purchase using that link and also our special code, which is also in the description, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons. Your support means the world to us. It's amazing that people want to help a small channel like us grow and get to a higher level of content. A big thank you to Gibraltar LUSC, Ryan Bertsche, Andrew Prince and Okro for subscribing to us at our Fane level. You guys are super cool. And a big thank you to Edward Yule, VS Vasan, Aaron Whitman and Shaggy for subscribing to us at our King level. Honestly, we can't thank you all enough. And lastly, a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing and commenting on these videos. Honestly, it's because of you guys that the channel's been growing at such a great pace lately, so we can't thank you all enough. But with that, my friends, thank you so much for watching once again, and we shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.